Welcome, welcome. Please do turn your webcams on and your mics. We're still just having a bit of a chat, see if anyone else joins us. And then we've got Liam to tell us all about artificial intelligence in the entertainment industry and how scared we should be.
I'm Liam. I'm Liam Budd. I sit within the recorded media department, and my role is I'm an industrial official for audio and new media. I'm actually covering for a colleague called Shannon Sailing, who's on maternity leave, so she's coming back in 3 weeks. But I'm staying with the department to continue the work around AI. But I'm also will be looking after streaming as well. So my role at the moment is to try and support and organize performing artists working in a broad range of professions. So voiceover artists, audiobooks, radio commercials, video games, and that covers audio artists and performance capture artists, and also performers who work in the world of virtual reality, but also in the world of AI and digital cloning. So I'm going to talk about AI, what it is, how it's impacting the industry, what we're doing as a union in response, and then I can open up to questions and just a general discussion to get your thoughts and feedback. So there is no single definition of AI, and it can be quite difficult to describe, but the government defines it as technologies with the ability to perform tasks that would require human intelligence. So the goal is essentially to create machines that can learn, that can reason, that can carry out tasks and make decisions similar to humans. That's like AI is like the broad umbrella, but then within that we've got something called generative AI. So generative AI is a subfield, and it's all about the creation of new content. So new text, images, audio, or code that resembles human created content, or what you often call synthetic media. So within generative AI, you've got two different areas that we often think about. We've got narrowly designed. So this is trained on a specific data set for a specific task and a specific context. And it's not about reusing it to create new things, like new contexts. Or we've got something called general purpose AI, which is what probably you're more familiar with. So this is an emerging type of system that requires data sets that feature billions of words or hundreds of millions of images scraped from the internet. And the whole idea is to make it capable of a wide range of tasks. So these huge models can translate and summarize text, they can generate reports for you, they can draft your emails, they can respond to your queries, and they can create new images and new audio and new texts. So you'll be familiar with ChatGPT, and that's one of those sort of general purpose models, but there are lots of other ones out there and they are advancing rapidly. And then within the entertainment world, we're particularly focused on something called performance cloning, which is essentially, it's like the creation of synthetic performances using digital technology, machine learning systems, or other stuff really. So we can call it performance cloning, we can call it digital cloning, we can call it performance synthesization, which I find really hard to say. But these are kind of terms that we're particularly focused on. And what we've seen over the last few years is an increasing number of our members having their image, their voice, their likeness, or their whole performance used to create these entirely new performances using AI technology, sometimes with their consent and sometimes without. And we've seen this process to create things like automated audiobooks, synthesized voice work, digital avatars for corporate videos. And then you've also got something called sort of deep fake technology, which is the manipulation of existing identities. So there's lots of stuff that's going out there and the technology is advancing rapidly. And in terms of, so what is the impact? Well, I think maybe talk about some of the potential, let's talk about some of the opportunities first. Well, there's a lot of fear circulating amongst the performing arts community, which is very understandable. I think it's important to remember that modifying a performer's image, voice, or likeness isn't a new thing. Filmmakers have been doing this since the dawn of cinema to bring to life characters, worlds, and stunts. And we as an industry can adapt to these new forms of innovation. as a union, we were the first union in the world to have an agreement with Netflix, and we've embraced innovation, but tried to ensure that we are shaping it in an ethical way. And if you think about it from an individual perspective, if you embrace AI and have ethical terms and conditions, it could increase your income on an individual level. You could get your image or voice or likeness cloned, go into a recording session, get it cloned, and then you could then receive income from not doing any work. So basically your avatar is producing work and you're getting paid for that. From an inequalities perspective, it could actually increase access into the labour market for our deaf and disabled members, and there are also potential safety benefits for our stunt performers. This is me playing devil's advocate here, and these are some of the potential opportunities it presents. However, and understandably, there is a lot of concern around the threat that AI poses to the performing arts. So it goes without saying the impact around job displacement. So we did a survey almost 2 years ago now, and at the time, 65% of performers thought that the AI posed a threat to employment opportunities. And this rose to 93% for our members who work as audio artists. And there is a legitimate fear for audio artists because the technology around voice synthesization is actually advancing quite rapidly, and is already proving to be a viable alternative for some areas of voice work where productions are less focused on quality and more on about quantity. Another area, I think, which is a legitimate fear is actually around the quality of creative output. So what we're going to be seeing is an abundance of creative output that's going to be potentially personalized to your individual tastes. But what this potentially leads to is a lack of originality and a lack of authenticity, because it's based on these huge data sets. It's all about producing stereotypes and just finding the norm of these enormous models. And that isn't doesn't produce, what's the word? It's not a landscape for creating human storytelling or human authenticity. So creative output is a concern. There's another areas are just around harmful content. So deepfake technology is actually can be very, very problematic. It was estimated that 96% of deepfakes are pornographic and depict women, and 99% come from the entertainment industry. Another issue we're facing is actually just around the quality of contracts. So we know that often members who work in areas where there aren't collectively bargained agreements often aren't given a contract. And then when we're seeing members who are actually being engaged for this kind of work, contracts I've seen have been pretty shocking. Low levels of pay, low levels of transparency around the terms, or very exploitative provisions that aren't ethical at all. So the quality of the contract is actually is a big issue that we're grappling with. I think I saw a few months ago there was a casting that went out, and they were offering £300 to clone a member's voice, and that then transferred all of their rights in perpetuity forever to then have their voice cloned for £300, which is obviously very problematic. So we've got the quality of contracts as an issue. We're also grappling with historical contracts or contracts our members have already signed. So often what we'll see is in areas where we don't have these collective agreements, members will be asked to sign contracts which say in all media, in perpetuity. And the word in all media is now very problematic because that inadvertently means that could include AI. And some companies we know have actually used contracts that date back 20 years to give them the authority now to clone a member's voice without their consent, because they signed a contract 20 years ago which said in all media in perpetuity, before generative AI ever existed, which is hugely problematic. Another issue is just around infringement on intellectual property. So these huge models that are scraping the internet and ingesting all of the created content are ignoring copyright rules and the rules around performers' rights as well. And they are just sucking them up and using them for these models. And that has a huge infringement that's taken place on an industrial scale. And some AI platforms are completely ignoring the rules, others are not, and they're just using data that they've got a license to use. But some believe that they can ingest all of this data because they think that there is a loophole in the law, and they're sort of taking a gamble that the government won't take a position on this, or if they go to court, they think they'll win. And then the challenge we've got with this position is that this infringement has taken place. The government are stepping back and not taking a clear position at the moment, and they are waiting for it to go through the courts, which could take years. And the reason why they're not taking a position because the law isn't clear. The law around copyright hasn't been updated with explicit provisions around AI, and it's a bit of a grey area around this, which is why it will probably need to go to the courts unless the government intervenes. So it's a bit of a tricky situation we're grappling with, and what we've been very concerned about is that the law is unclear, the government haven't been very helpful, and our members were going in blind and signing up to work and getting their image, voice, or likeness cloned. And we were very mindful of that. So the first thing we did was we launched a campaign back in April 2022 called Stop AI Stealing the Show. And what we wanted to do was to highlight the transformative impact of AI on our industry and call on the government to strengthen the rights of performers. So in the start of the campaign, we really focused on the policy space to highlight the lack of clarity in the law, the need for strengthened performers' rights. So what we did, we launched the campaign and we had reports with survey findings, case studies, and we got a lot of quite really good press coverage out of it, which we then used as a springboard to then open up conversations within government. So we had conversations with MPs, with government ministers, but also our members themselves took this campaign forward and lobbied their local MPs around it as well. We've had members tabling notions conference, the equity conference. We've had motions put forward at the TUC Congress as well. And our members have actually been the driving force behind this campaign, because it was actually our audio committee who first raised the alarm about AI and wanted the union to be doing more. And they've been heavily involved, and so has the Screen and New Media Committee. And we've got some really fantastic activists who have been driving forward this campaign. So along this journey of launching the campaign, something happened maybe a year ago. When was it? When are we? October. Probably around a year ago, where the government announced that they wanted to introduce something called this data mining exemption. I'm not sure if you've seen it in the news. It was quite hidden in terms of, like, not normally people knew about it, but they basically wanted to make they wanted to give technology companies the ability to scrape all publicly available creative works, even if they were protected by copyright. They wanted those copyright provisions to not exist if you were using AI. So it was the text and data mining exemption. This basically meant that technology companies could have unfettered access to all copyrighted works to use as part of their models, because the government wanted the UK to be this global AI superpower. In response to that, we as a union kicked up a big fuss. So the audio committee wrote to government ministers. We also mobilized our members to lobby their local MPs. So hundreds of equity members wrote to their local MPs and raised the alarm. And equity took a really leading position in terms of fighting against this very damaging policy. But fortunately, lots of the other creative industry unions and organizations were also singing from the same hymn sheet, because we all thought this was a terrible idea. So earlier this year, as part of a parliamentary debate, the government decided that they would pause on this policy. They haven't said abandon, they said they'll rethink it, because they accepted that it was not well thought out, which was a positive development and actually showed the strength of our members who were driving forward this campaign to stop this policy from going through. So that was a real win for the campaign. Alongside the sort of policy space where we're talking about government and parliament, we were also very mindful about wanting to actually empower our members to feel that they could engage or not engage in this work. So what we did is we we engaged a leading academic and a leading expert called Dr. Mathilde Pavie, who I work with very, very closely. And together, we put together what we call the AI toolkit. So the aim was really to empower our members to understand this new and evolving landscape. We want them to feel that they could make an informed decision whether they wanted to engage with this kind of work or not engage. We wanted to give them the tools to be able to negotiate ethical, fair terms and conditions. We also wanted to educate our members to know what their rights were so they could protect themselves from being exploited. So what we put together in our toolkit was this whole suite of information, a summary of what the landscape is, a summary of our members' rights, a vision statement which outlines what we believe ethical AI to be in the world of performing arts. We put together a template contract for members who want to engage in synthetic performance work, which was pretty groundbreaking. So now, if you want to go and get your voice cloned or your likeness cloned, you can use our contract. And that's done through what we believe to be ethical terms and conditions. We've also got model AI clauses, which I think are probably the most important for every performer, because the clauses that you can use in any contract going forward to say, I don't want my image, voice, or likeness to be exploited using AI technology. It's almost like an anti-AI clause. So if you don't feel comfortable with having any of your likeness or voice or image being used through AI, you can include this clause in any contract going forward. A final resource is something called the takedown notice. So I've talked about this huge infringement that's happened in terms of people's intellectual property. And if you've noticed that your voice is being used through a technology or just somewhere online on a website, which we have seen happen with members, we've put together a template letter, which is basically demanding that it's removed from the website and erased. And in the letter, we've used all of the legal technicalities of why that must happen. So we've used copyright provisions, GDPR provisions, international treaties. We've basically used all the possible legal levers we can use to make that threat for it to be removed. So the whole suite of resources that members actually can use, which is really helpful going forwards. And within this whole package of work, I'll maybe talk about what we actually, what's in it really. So within the template contract, a key focus is around consent. So basically, there must be consent granted from the performer if you're going to record the performance, reproduce it, collect their data, or generate a clone, anything around AI, there must be consent. This is like the linchpin of all the work that we do. And in the template contract, if you're going to use someone's voice or likeness for AI, it has to be done in a way which is ethical. So there can't be exclusivity clauses. It has to be really limited in how it's exploited, not this buyouts in perpetuity around the world in all media and around the universe. It has to be very specific, time-focused, focused on a particular project. And we've also got a structure around how you can try and work out fair remuneration, which is actually a big project. So the feedback from the toolkit has been really positive. I felt it's empowered members to go forward and actually make informed decisions. The agent community has also picked this up, so they've been trying to implement these clauses in their contracts of the members that they're working with, some with success and some not. So some areas are flat out refusing. So the likes of Audible, the big publishers, the streaming platforms, the big American corporations are saying absolutely not. Whereas some companies who aren't around in that particular world are happily engaging and accepting these clauses. So the next stage that we've sort of launched our campaign and we're engaging Parliament. We've launched our resources for members and we're engaging members. The next thing forward is all around actually collective bargaining. So if you're familiar, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term, collective bargaining is the process we go through to establish these collectively bargained agreements that have minimum fees and terms and conditions that we negotiate to have safeguard our members and have a floor. We have in our department that I work in, we have collective agreements with the BBC, with ITV, with PACT, which is an umbrella body for the producers, and with all the streaming platforms. And these agreements need updating to have AI clauses in there to protect our members. So now that we've done the work where we understand what we think is ethical, we're now trying to negotiate this going forward, which is no easy task. So for us, I'll talk about some of the principles that we're focused on to shape all of those negotiations that will be going forward. So one of the key principles is around being human-centered. So we think that human artistry should be at the center of content creation and creative work. AI should be a tool to empower, not replace. I've talked about consent. So there should be consent from the artist, whether you're training AI or you're producing AI works. And this should include old contracts, new contracts, future contracts. It's all around consent. We think performers should actually have control over how their digital replicas are being used. No longer these buyouts in perpetuity, but again, time-specific, limited purpose, and control. And control doesn't just mean how it's used, but also the ability to withdraw your controls. To say, I actually don't want to consent anymore. I want the ability to. So yeah, control is a big thing. Compensation is another key principle here. Fair and proportionate compensation for performers that mitigates against the loss of potential employment. So the right to fair remuneration, we feel, is just not just for existing performers, but also post-mortem. So if you die and you have your avatar used, there should be payment around that. So we've got consent, control, compensation, and then transparency. So transparency for performers, so they understand how and where their performance is being used. Transparency for consumers too, so consumers know when AI-generated output is being used. So these are, I would say, some of the key principles around consent, control, compensation, and transparency. So we are in a bit of a crossroads. We've got a lot of negotiations going ahead in all of our key areas in the recorded media space, and this is what we're going to be taking forward into those negotiations. And alongside what we're doing, you may have seen that there has been a strike in America with SAG-AFTRA, and they are moving forward as well. And AI is a key topic and an area of dispute. And I can talk more about that if that's helpful. And the Writers Guild in America have also got a deal which has secured terms around AI. And with SAG-AFTRA and the Writers Guild in America, there are also shared principles around non-replacement, control, consent, transparency. And we have similar principles with all the unions around the world. And equity is part of what we call this AI task force, where we work with the other unions in the Federation of International Trade Unions, and we share information as part of this sort of global effort to try and protect our members. So there's been a lot going on, and I've just sort of talked at you then for 20 minutes, but hopefully I've given you a good summary of what we've been doing.
Yeah.
And I can answer any questions if that's helpful.
So, any questions from the room? Kim is in our chair. Kim, do you want to ask for some questions or give some insights from what you can take from this?
Liam, you mentioned about the collective bargaining. I mean, traditional collective bargaining would be with you mentioned this, with an organisation that would represent the people you're trying to get a contract with. Do you know what I mean? Presumably, that's very difficult in terms of the plethora of organisations using AI. Is there any move towards a professional body, either in this country or globally, that would give them the benefit of professional standards and contracts, but also give us someone to negotiate with? Or is it randomly with those companies that want to talk to the union? Do you know what I mean? Because SAG-AFTRA must have had an agreement with the big companies, to be able to have moved on. So are the other side, so to speak, acting collectively? I mean, that's what it boils down to.
So we have a collective agreement with PACT, who represent the producers, and they cover so we have our cinema films agreement. Nearly like 90% of films, maybe even more than that, are under an equity agreement. so there are already bodies that we can negotiate with who are thinking about how they're going to be using AI in the future. So the existing agreements say the likes of BBC, the producers through Pact, the streaming companies, they'll be who we're negotiating with. The vacuum right now is actually these new startups who have become these what we call synthesizer companies. So there's a company called Synthesia who are actually, they're directly engaging our members to clone their likeness, or these companies around the world who are I don't know, doing synthesized voice work. These companies have no history of negotiating with unions at all because they're very new companies. So we're having conversations with all of those sort of key players, and in an ideal world, we could be able to get agreements with them, but that is a difficult task.
Yeah.
So there are lots of different pinch points, really. There are the synthesizer companies, but there are also then the traditional companies who we negotiate with already, who have agreements and need updating. There are also the areas where we don't have agreements. So in the world of audio, which I look after, we have very few agreements because we have no one to negotiate with and on a collective level. So there is in the audio world, there's a trade body called Audio UK, but they don't do collective bargaining. They don't represent the industry in that way, and they refuse to engage through that process. In games, the same thing happens. We have a trade body called Yuki, and we've been saying you should be negotiating collectively with us if you're the trade body for video games companies, and they say, oh, we don't do collective bargaining. We're not, what's the word? They're not instructed in that way to be able to do it. Which means that there are areas where we don't have agreements because there is no one to negotiate collectively with, which means that the conditions are typically poorer, which is the areas that I look after. But what is the big concern is those areas are actually the most likely to be using AI. So audio is one of the big areas, and video games. So it's a bit like herding cats. There's only so much capacity for us as a union to be able to negotiate these agreements with all these individual companies. It's much easier to do it collectively, like we do with Pact in the world of film and TV, or like we do in theatre with SALT, who represent the theatres around the UK. So it's a bit of a minefield.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of, in a way, I think you articulated all that stuff through very informative speech talk that you've already given. I just kind of wanted it to be confirmed to say it is like herding cats. Yes, it is going to be.
Oh, it's
But there's all those other fronts that you talked about in terms of where we can, for instance, the clauses in the contract and stuff like that, which can be moved together, in the way that the union is looking at it. Any other?
And I think in the absence of those spaces, what we've done, so the template contract has actually been really helpful because that's already being disseminated around the industry. So that's being used as best practice. So those companies where we don't have agreements are already very familiar with our contract. And although it might not be perfect in terms of they're using every precise word, they're at least understanding what we think is ethical terms and conditions, and it's shaping what they're doing. That's not ideal. We'd rather have agreements and be able to negotiate with them. But in a fractured industry where we don't have the structures to be able to negotiate collectively, that's what we've done so far. But establishing AI clauses going forward in the negotiations we have going with Pact, BBC, ITV, if we do that, that will be a huge achievement. It's just an uphill battle. But what is good is that we are ahead of the curve in terms of our thinking. So we launched this campaign last April, before the conversation around AI was in the mainstream. So we got ahead of it very quickly and actually done a lot of thinking. So we're going into these meetings now in a very informed space, much more so, I would say, than the producers. So when we raised the issue of AI first, people thought, oh God, what's this thing? And haven't really thought about it. And now they're coming to us wanting to talk about it, but we're much more advanced in our thinking because we've had a year and a half to do it. Whereas now everyone's sort of flustered and panicking around AI because it's accelerating. So yeah, that's evident. Even it seems to have moved on even since the equity conference, actually, in terms of the information being given there. So it's kind of moving quite rapidly.
Yes. Well,
I just wanted to say thank you, Liam, as a voiceover artist. The toolkit is amazing. There's so much work clearly that's gone into it, as you well know. But a lot of our work, as you know, we're negotiating as individuals as well as those as the bigger, you know, BBCs and the ITVs and what have you. But the 80% of my work, I'm negotiating by myself. So the toolkit's been a godsend really for us to do the best we can to use some of those clauses. And I know you're aware that there's a lot of our work as well that it's a real struggle to get anyone to even sign anything, but actually your agreement is your quote or your email or whatever, that forms your agreement, doesn't it? So I think the more we can cascade that information and encourage different parts of the industry to use it, and you know the voiceover industry, that element is using these things quite fiercely as best we can, the better. It's cascade learning, isn't it? If we can try and keep going with all these organisations, hopefully people will become more familiar with those calls. But it's you know, it'll be an ongoing challenge, won't it? The big boys that don't want to listen won't listen and won't sign, will they? So we'll keep at it. But thank you.
No, pleasure. And it's been really inspiring to see the audio community really pick this up and take it forward. But I've been very conscious that this isn't just an audio thing. Lots of performers in all areas. If you're in stunts, if you're a supporting artist, if you're working in video games, everyone is susceptible to this. And even if you work in live performance, people need to be thinking about AI. So as a union, we're trying to have this whole union-wide conversation, really getting members to pick up the toolkit and take it forward. What I'm also conscious that it's quite a league, it can't be quite daunting reading the template contract. So one of the things I would like to do is to almost do like a refresh of it. And I've been talking with Matilda about how we can make it as easy and accessible to read. So at some point down the future, we're going to sort of refine it, make sure we take on any comments and feedback from members just to make it as simple and easy to understand. So what we've launched is sort of the first draft, and I'm sure there'll be edits along the way to make it better. But within the toolkit, there's lots of FAQs, and I'm constantly evolving that over time. So if something comes up which isn't clear and a member gets in touch with me and says, oh, I don't understand this, clearly there's a problem. So then we've got these FAQs which are really helpful, and we're basically just building on those FAQs going forward. And even on the model clauses, we've got some feedback already that some of the engagers don't like them, they don't understand it, and they're pushing back, or they're saying this word is confusing. And we're taking that with a lot of salt, because it's actually, they should be able to understand it. But if we can change things so that it's easier to negotiate, we're very open to doing that, as long as they fulfill the criteria of what we're trying to achieve. So I think we've been on a journey and we're still learning lots as we go along, really. And so any feedback from members is always really appreciated.
Any questions?
Liam, just one very quick question. I wondered how many people there are in your team, bearing in mind this is a huge area.
So people think that the staffing structures are huge equity, but actually we're not a big. So I'm the official, so I've been doing the AI work. We've got assistants who help with each area. So in our department, there's an official for film, TV. So a separate official for film, a separate official for TV, a separate official for commercials. Then I do audio, new media. But then we'll have an assistant who will help with each of those areas. So it's not a department or a team, really. It's just me, and I get support from Wayne, who helps with all casework around audio. But what is the team, I would say, is the members. So the audio committee, I've relied on incredibly a lot to shape the work that we do. I look after games, and we're doing a big piece of work around games we're about to launch soon. And we have a games working party with some incredible activists who shape the work that we're doing. So the committee structures and the working parties are, I would say, the team that we have, because they're actually the working artist. I don't work as an audio artist. I've never done a single minute of recording work for audio. So it's the members themselves who shape the work that we do, and I coordinate and I gather people and organize them to then shape that. And it's a bit of it's all around organizing, I would say.
But
So,
then
yeah.
you've provided some template contracts. Did you have some legal input into that to help you?
Yes, so this is what the team is also what I mentioned, the academic or legal expert Mathilde Pavie. So she has been a lifeline, to be honest, for the union. So she has a very reputable sort of industry figure on this, who has done a lot of work in the past around performers' rights and has become a bit of a specialist in synthetic media and ethical work around that. So she drafted the template after when I spoke with her and we talked about what we want to achieve. And so she has been very instrumental in shaping our thinking around this, which has been, I think, really, really needed. Yeah.
Because you mentioned one phrase, something about I do not agree for my likeness, etc., to be exploited. The use of the word exploited is unclear and could be open to dispute.
Yeah, I think it's a tricky term because we often, it's not about exploitation. It's actually about how it's about being used in a way to create something else. Yeah, it's probably shouldn't work. It's a confusing term, so
We get some kickback about that.
Yeah.
I made a lot of notes. Presumably, any material coming out of a union or anywhere would have a glossary, because I'd really like to, because I've not noted all those things down about general purpose and narrowly designed and generative and synthetic and everything else, but actually I'd quite like that permanently in front of me.
Yes.
In terms of a general intro to the issues. I mean, I know that, I'm saying that in a glib kind of way, but I know that would be quite a difficult document to produce. But short, I mean, you've just done it actually. I mean, short descriptions of what those things are.
So we have on the website, like on the toolkit, it's about understanding the landscape. We have some definitions, but it could do with an update already. And I've actually learned quite a lot from an organization called Ada Lovelace. And Ada Lovelace are they're a think tank essentially who have published some very, very good reports around this. So I'd recommend looking them up. They've been for me, they've been the most easy to understand explanations of AI, because I felt a bit lost in it sometimes, and Ada Lovelace have managed to cut through and explain it in a very simple way. But we're constantly learning. I'm learning all the time, to be honest. So.
And it's always developing, I expect.
Yeah.
Good. Anybody got any other questions?
So what is next, Liam, for equity and AI? Where are you finding yourself over the next couple of months, and what's likely to happen in the next sort of 3 to 6 months?
So right now, I've been sucked into a lot of work within government because I'm part of an intellectual property office, AI and IP working party. So the government is putting together a voluntary code of practice around AI and intellectual property, which is a whole beast of work. And I've been sucked into lots of meetings. So that's my immediate thing around working within the IPO to shape their work. But personally, I've just been at numerous amounts of conferences and roundtables and external events talking about AI because everyone's now obsessed with it. But as a union, we are going into negotiations. That's the big priority, is negotiating with in the recorded media space to try and get those AI provisions secured. So that is a big task that we will be focusing on.
And those who have found AI appearing on their radar very recently, before we say goodbye to you, and thank you so much for being our guest, and we give you our round of applause. Yes. What should people look out for, and what is their encounter likely to be that makes them want to contact the union, or what might they contact you about?
So I would say never sign a contract which says in all media, ever, going forward. read your contracts, because producers are being very sneaky now and putting in wording which will give them the ability to use your likeness in a way which could be used for AI. So I think read your contracts and make sure you're not signing away your rights in that space.
If there is no more questions
Can I
from,
just tag on to that?
Okay, yeah.
Gillian,
What sort of wording are you
Well,
going to say?
If a member is approached by a company with a contract and there is a wording in there that causes them to pause and reflect and say, well, I'd rather not have that word. Can I have something perhaps off the equity toolkit? And the company says, no, take the contract or don't. Can the member come to you or your department or anybody at equity and say, please back me up on this? Because they may be intimidated and not challenging the company.
So this is where saying no is really important, because we are really trying to empower our members to say no to contracts that are not ethical or where members don't feel comfortable. So I'd say the power of saying no is really important. I would say it's a bit like whack-a-mole. If every single member who came to us and said, equity, will you back me up, and what we actually want to do is to organize the workforce of 50,000 members we represent to work collectively to start pushing back and saying no, to push the industry in a certain way. It is helpful, however, for members to share contracts with me if they're around sort of performance cloning, just so we can see the kinds of contracts that our members are being asked to work on. So it's always helpful just to share information with me around that. It would be just whether you'd want the union to be involved in at the start of any engagement to negotiate a contract, whether that would be a good start to a relationship with a company going forward. We're very happy to intervene when things go wrong, which is why we always encourage members to contact the union if you think that your rights have been infringed, or your contract has there's a dispute in your contract. But typically that happens when things go wrong. We're trying to empower members at the beginning to actually say no to this kind of stuff.
and Tracy, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I suddenly thought of a question when you were answering the last question. It's like all my contracts just come through my agent, and I don't read them. To be honest, that's why I have an agent. So how engaged is equity with agents?
So when we launched our toolkit, we did a whole session where we invited all the agent community to come along and listen to us, learn from us, and then start using our toolkit and our clauses. The agents are, I would say, quite familiar, are increasingly familiar with the work we're doing, but I would say that won't cover all the agent community. And when I've gone in person to talk to different agencies, the level of awareness, the knowledge has actually been quite low in some. Like, I've been quite surprised how little they know. So I would never want a member just to assume that their agents are on top of this and not to think that they also have responsibility in terms of looking at their contracts and checking the commercial terms. I think it's now important for every single person in the chain, the member, the agent, the casting director, the producer, to all be thinking about this, and for members themselves to really take this responsibility of actually checking your contracts. It's so important, because the potential for exploitation in a negative sense is huge now. It's 20 years ago there wasn't the technology to be able to edit your voice and to say anything. Now a small bit of voice recording could AI could make you say anything. It's just very important now that people are on top of their contracts. So I think it's educating. Everyone's on a journey now to become experts in contract. Really.
Maggie.
Same as Tracy, what the relationship with the agents were, is there some kind of way of really letting the agents know, and maybe for the agents to be asking the question whenever requests are coming in for talent, to actually just ask the question about where do they stand with the AI, just a kind of almost like not a throwaway question, but a question which is actually raising the awareness so something going out to agents or through the members, for the members to say to the agents, can you please ask what their standing, what their approach is with regards to AI, or whatever way to frame the question. I'm not quite sure, but just from that point of view, so that it's by asking the question, you're making the employers aware of the fact that the question is being asked, and that the talent is interested in knowing that for a start. Maybe.
Yeah, so I think every member could be asking that, who has an agent, should be asking them, what are you doing? Have you read Equities AI Toolkit? Are you inserting Equities AI clauses into my contracts in areas where I don't want AI to be used? Have you watched Equities webinars? We've got webinars on our toolkit for each area, each resource. Has the agent watched those webinars so they know how to use it? Have you watched those webinars? It's a whole load of resources that agents can be using going forward. So I think, although when people talk about equity, they think, well, what can Liam do as the official to empower the agent community? And we're doing lots there, but actually it's what can the collective workforce of 50,000 members could do to shift things as well. Because we're all equity.
Thank you for questions. I think that brings us to a close.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Liam, and everyone. If you can... and thank you very much.
Yeah.
Applause for Liam. And
Thank
applause.
And yeah, enjoy the rest of the meeting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's really good. Really good.
Great. Well, it was a pleasure talking to everyone. And if you've got any questions, feel free to email me. And yeah, I think just use the toolkit and start taking it forward in your contracts going forwards, and get involved in our campaigning work when things come up. So yeah.